An architecture program captures a building function in great detail. For some designers, the function of a building can be seen to restrict the creative process, innovation, and aesthetics. However, the lack of attention to the functional requirements will assure those that use the building every day will see it as a failure in design. Architectural program is therefore an essential consideration in every design project and process. Stay with me and we'll find out why. I'm Liz Watt. Welcome back to Archimash, the best place for aspiring architects to learn faster and easier. In today's episode, I'm going to explore the architecture program and I'll explain the difference between program and brief, how to define a program, and how to explore the program in the design process. Let's dive in and consider exactly what an architecture program is in relation to the brief. So the term program can also be used to discuss the schedule or the phases of a project. So this is not what we're talking about here. Architectural program is also often used interchangeably or can be confused with a brief. It's often said that the term brief is used in Australia while program in the United States, but they're actually quite different and both valid. An architecture brief is a statement of the client's requirements which form the basis for appointing a designer or architect. So the brief describes the requirements that need to be included across the whole project. The program may be just one part of the brief. A good brief will go far beyond the program and functional requirements of a project. It normally includes an architectural program as part of the brief, but will also include information about the scope of services and what's expected of the architect or designer in exchange for fees. The project scope of work, such as the site and location, materials, typology, the users and the project goals and aspirations. An architecture program is what happens within a building or site. It's a detailed breakdown of the spaces within the project based on client requirements, user activities and needs, and spaces required for the building to operate and function. A good brief will give the designer room to move and explore options to solve project and program requirements. If you want to learn more about the brief, check out the episode titled Architecture Project Brief or Design Brief, and I'll leave the link in the description. Let's talk about defining the program. So a program is developed by first understanding and then considering what is to happen in the building. A brief can be a simple document of a few pages for a house or up to hundreds of pages for something more complex like a university building, a laboratory, or a government or defense facility with highly unique and complicated activities. So let's first consider the functional requirements, which are what is needed for the building to function and meet the needs of the users. There are three aspects which need to be considered, which include firstly, users and people. So the different users and user groups and their activities, needs and desires, and the physical space required for each of these activities. Second is equipment. So the physical objects that the users require to complete their different activities within the structure, as well as any additional objects that need to be stored. So it's important to have a detailed inventory as possible for physical items to be stored, housed, and used in the building, as space needs to be developed specifically for each of these things. So depending on the building typology, this could include furniture, stationery, equipment, machinery, appliances, clothing, or personal belongings. And then the third consideration is vehicles. So the vehicles used by the users to transport them to and from the facility and the associated space required for storage, turning, movement, and maintenance. This could include cars, motorbikes, trucks, or boats. So that's kind of the functional requirements. Then let's look at the operational requirements, which are the activities, equipment, and what is needed to keep the building physically operating. So these include things like elevators, security, audiovisual communications, mechanical, heating and ventilation systems, removal of rubbish, recycling and waste, gardening or landscaping, cleaning or window washing on a high-rise. In a house or a simple building, these may be basic, but in larger, more complex buildings, these items can be much more detailed and comprehensive. It may be prudent to consult the people who will operate, maintain, and service the building to understand their needs. While these people may not use the building daily, it's essential to understand their requirements for access to certain areas or equipment. So once the functional and operational requirements are understood, the program can be developed into an accommodation schedule. An accommodation schedule is usually in the form of a table that captures the different spaces and their requirements. Depending on the size, scale, and complexity of a project, the accommodation schedule will collate the specific requirements for each building, floor, or level, and internal spaces or rooms, as well as external spaces. So the types of spaces may include, firstly, primary spaces, the spaces required to house the functional requirements of the building. These include things like kitchens, living rooms, offices, bathrooms, classrooms, bedrooms, or dining rooms. Okay, the main spaces. Then secondly, we have ancillary spaces. These are more support spaces and include things like communication rooms, air conditioning plants, storage, cleaners rooms, elevator shafts, and plant, and even circulation. So the table will be produced with a list of spaces or rooms down the left column, and then a series of columns for each space with the following information. So we'll have a look at area. An area or specific dimensions of the final internal space. We'll consider users who will use the room either as a generic type of person, such as a student, doctor, nurse, or a specific person or role, such as David Wilson, finance manager. We'll consider the average and maximum number of people to use the space at any one time and who they are. For example, maximum 5, including manager, and up to 4 guests. We'll look at a list of activities to be undertaken in the space with specific attention to movement or changes in the position and requirements of the human body within the space. A classroom is different to a dance studio, is different to a lounge room or a bedroom. An accommodation schedule will include a list of the specific equipment to be housed in the room, including numbers and sizes, dimensions, and coding of final selections. So equipment could include furniture, appliances, personal belongings, as well as specific storage requirements for the equipment, such as height, depth, or length of shelves, or circulation requirements for moving the equipment. Some of it can be old and existing, some of it can be new. Then you'll add notes or comments to include any additional specific information that relates to that space and affects the function, operation, or development of the design. So for example, relationships to other spaces. A robe must be accessed from the main bedroom, public toilets must be outside the secure area, or the office must be within a secure area. Or you can add specific qualities and characteristics of that space. For example, it must face a northern aspect, or a studio space must have excellent natural day lighting. And this will help the designer know how things relate to one another as they're developing the design. An accommodation schedule should be developed and agreed upon early in the process with the client. When areas are allocated to spaces, a quick cost estimate can be made based on square meter rates to determine a very broad cost estimate. The overall project scope can then be adjusted as required. An agreed accommodation schedule gives both the client and the designer a benchmark against which to measure any program or design changes. So without a clear program, the project design can quickly get out of hand, or upon completion, the project may not meet the functional requirements of the users, especially if they haven't been consulted. Once a program is developed, this becomes a key consideration in your design process. You can learn more about this overall process in the episode Top 9 Architecture Design Factors for all architecture projects. I really urge you to have a look at this. It explains all the key factors. I'll leave the link in the description. The architecture program is just one aspect of the design process, and it can be considered at several different scales to help develop ideas, concepts, and resolution of the design. At the mega scale, we look at building typology. So the type of building or structure that is to be designed and constructed, such as a school, house, hospital, shop, or office building. Research can be undertaken into precedents of examples of similar buildings or aesthetics or best practices for this type of building that can be used as a reference. At the macro level, we look at zones. So the way similar types of spaces, uses, and activities can be grouped within a building or within parts of a building or a project to create a strategy for the project. Zones can include things like public or private, entry and exit, front of house, back of house, circulation or transition, internal and external. At that macro level, we're also looking at functional relationships or the way different spaces relate to one another. Should bathrooms be grouped together or spread out evenly throughout the building? Which spaces specifically need to come off a lobby, reception, or waiting area? Are there spaces that need to go together or be kept apart? How do we move between spaces and what is that transitional experience? These are the sort of things we need to start to consider as we design about the program and what goes where. At the micro level, we look at individual spaces and the unique requirements of one space, as well as the impact of the function and operation on the aesthetics, volume, and form. So the opportunities for a bathroom are very different to a gallery or performance space. Each space needs to be considered and the design developed to accommodate furniture, equipment, and activities in the best layout possible. A good brief will allow a designer to capture the project requirements in the program, but give some flexibility in the design solution to meet these needs. This could include things like multi-use or multi-purpose spaces that can be adjusted to meet multiple needs in one space instead of 3 or 4, which saves on costs and size, and it's much more efficient. It could be found that a solution to a user need may not necessarily be a physical facilities solution, but more of a management solution. So for example, 3 different departments in a university may all require a lecture hall for 2 days a week. A single central facility used every day with a booking system may be a better solution than 3 mostly empty buildings. So program is often dismissed by many architects who have a design focus. They feel it can restrict the creative process and outcome. However, the most imaginative architectural forms may win awards for their aesthetics, but in a way are useless to the users who cannot furnish a circular space or don't have direct access to resources that have been hidden away by a designer in a closet down the hall for a minimalist effect when they need it every day right here, or who do not have enough daylight, or who have to take guests through the kitchen to get to the dining room. Program is an essential consideration in the design process. Taking the time to define and explore its opportunities at the start of a project can help give the design a really clear direction and save a lot of reworking during the design process by trying to define the program through trial and error. Choose to see the architecture program as an opportunity to explore rather than a challenge or hindrance. So if you have any questions or thoughts about architecture program, the brief or the design process, let me know in the comments or at archimash.com/askliz. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, make sure you like and subscribe. I have a ton of content to share to help make learning, studying, and practicing architecture easier and faster. While you wait for the next episode, make sure you check out some of my other work, either here or at archimash.com. That's everything for today. Have a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.